The content, views, and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the producer and do not necessarily reflect the view and opinions of the City of Bremerton, BCAT, their officials, or their employees.
Hi, my name is Phil Colcord. I'm president of Fraternal Order of Police, Evergreen Lodge 1 here in Kitsap County. And this is our outreach program. This show is going to be a little different than our other shows. I have our chaplain, Mark, here from our FOP Lodge, Evergreen Lodge 1 in Kitsap County. And good to see you, Mark.
How you doing?
I'm doing good, and you?
Pretty good.
Okay. We're having this show to let you folks know out there why we started doing our outreach program and what we're trying to accomplish with it and the work we're putting into it. I'm going to start this off a little different with a poem. It's called Cocaine, and it was written in 1989. And it said, "They call me cocaine, coke for short. Illegally I enter the country from every port. I find my way to the crooks and the making them rich, while those they kill lay forgotten in the ditch. Worth more than diamonds and even gold, use me once, and even you'll be sold. Educators young and old forget their looks, while beautiful models forget their looks." Should have been books. "I'll take those that intrigue and make them a bore, while your mother I'll turn into a whore. I make teachers unable to teach and preachers forget to preach. I'll take your money demanding more, evicted you will be. While you're young, either die or you're born addicted to me. And yet it's not enough, you'll rob and steal and kill, for I'm the force of power controlling your will. I make misery and mayhem a common affair, and as I become your ruler, you haven't a prayer. Just maybe you have a clue, now what will you do? After all, it's always been up to you. Remember, if you call me friend, I'll make you pay all the way to the end. So listen hard and listen well, because I'm cocaine, you're living hell." That was written in 1989, and back then cocaine was one of the worst problems we were having, cocaine and heroin on the streets with addictions and people use. Today, you can take the problem we had, and with the opioids and
Everything else in the
everything
world.
else, all the drugs now, it's a lot worse. And you know, I think drugs being illegal separated the people from the cops, because a lot of people have family that were into drugs, and so the cops became their enemy to some degree. And we fought a hard battle, but we lost. And now it's worse because people got offended, so they did away with laws. And we have people, addiction worse than ever, and a lot stronger.
Yeah, I spent a lot of years on the southwest border working for the federal government, interdicting drugs and guns and everything else, and part of the problem is of course, if you don't have a secure border so that you stop the inflow of illegal items and things that hurt people, which includes illegal drugs, that just exacerbates the problem. And I'll tell a short little story about this odd effect it has on people, because it doesn't sink in. Just before I got transferred up to Seattle in 2000, we were undergoing a huge increase in seizures at the border and stuff. And we had an arrangement with the state and locals that below a certain amount of marijuana and stuff, and also dealing with minors, we could call them and they would take it. So it was this one case, and I think I was one of the duty agents that day, so we're down dealing with another case, and then we got this case that was underneath the threshold and had 2 or 3 young high school girls, 16 years old, in this load car. And I still remember to this day, the state guy is sitting there interviewing him and everything and telling him what's going on. And partway through the interview, the one woman driving goes, well, I got to go back to school, so how much longer is this going to take? And the guy looks at her and he goes, do you understand? I explained to you, but do you understand what we're doing here? And she says, well, what do you mean? I was, so I was driving the car. She says, but it had a load of dope in it. And, you must have known what was going on. And she says, well, basically, it was not a big deal. I was just driving the car, and can I go to my class? And it just, the mentality was such they couldn't foresee the consequences. Mm-hmm. It was like they were living in a la-la land. And I think the problem we're having here with that now is you've got a lot of younger generation out there. They're definitely experimenting with a lot of drugs, and then they're finding out that the drugs they thought they were taking aren't. It's not just a normal pain pill, Mm-hmm. It's been spiked, and they die, and then everybody wonders why. Mm-hmm.
And that's a big tragedy.
Yeah, and
hey, on that same note, back in the day, I was doing drug awareness for the Elks, and the sheriff for the county was Boyer.
Yeah.
And Boyer teamed up with me to go put on drug talks at the different events, PTA meetings and so forth. And he carried with him a picture of a young, real pretty girl who was a total A student. And then her senior year, she got messed up with the wrong people and ended up into cocaine. And she never made it to graduation. She died of an overdose before graduation. And, tragedy that affects the whole family and to this day. And he carried the picture around to show people, this is the reality of what happens when people do drugs. And now it's even worse. Yeah. And there's no accountability in a lot of places. We used to, when we arrested them, they got rehab, whether they wanted it or not. And, now, instead of rehab, a lot of times, they offer it, but they don't want it, and there's nothing to force them to have to go through it.
That's the thing, and I've seen some discussions on this too, that apparently now, if a guy this is part of the movement in the local legislature, if a guy is dealing and he suddenly makes a mistake of using his own stuff and it has basically almost kills himself, and somebody runs in with Narcan and saves him, okay, but he's got a pile of dope there. Apparently they said, well, he's a victim now because he had an overdose, so we're not going to try to deal with the fact that he's got all those other drugs here. We're not talking about just personal use. We're talking about definitely a level and amount that the guy's dealing. Okay.
Well,
and yet they're saying, well, it's fine, because he was a victim and we had to use Narcan, we're going to look the other way. And I'm going, okay, fine. Then he's going to walk out and keep doing the same thing. Mm-hmm.
One of the chiefs here that I interviewed, he had one individual they give him the Narcan to 3 separate times, and every time he told him, "Go away, I don't want any help." But see, the thing of it is, the bigger picture is we need accountability.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that if you don't have a system set up where, I don't care who you are, there's honest mistakes and there's dishonest mistakes. No matter what side of the badge you're on, if you make a dishonest mistake, you have to stand up and say, hey.
Well, it's contributory too. Yeah. How many people die of it?
Yeah.
The system, they tried to fix it, and I think they made it worse. And I think I'm just going to come out and say it. I think a lot of the legislators are naive, don't have a clue, and they're screwed things up instead of helping them make them better. You need to, and instead of thinking of the drug user or drug dealer and have them at victim, think of all the victims that
Yeah.
are created because of the addiction. You know, every time somebody breaks into a house, they rob somebody,
Oh, yeah.
it's all back to the drugs. They did it for money. You know, we'd saying, I interviewed a lot of people, and I talked to some people, and one of them that was the national president of FOP.
Yeah.
And he was saying, you know, you have to have accountability because certain people, that's the only way they learn. They have to be fearful of you, you know. And that anybody desperate,
Yeah.
anybody that's bad, I mean, you know, majority of people are good, but there's still bad people out there, and the only reason they obey the law is because they're afraid of
Right.
consequences.
And the other flip side of that, too, is there are those substances that create psychoses, violent psychoses in people. That's why you've got some people who say they're libertarian, that they want to legalize all the drugs. You know, in other words, you should be able to take anything you want without prescription or whatever. Failing to realize that, you know, long-term use of cocaine, long-term use of methamphetamines, long-term use of Oxycontin, all those drugs that are mind-altering, I mean serious mind-altering, you start developing psychoses, and quite often you become violent. So you have to have some controls. If all you were worried about, you could be hard-hearted and say, okay, if that person wants to kill themselves, it's their business. But the problem being is, and then when you've got those individuals that are led to violence because of what they're ingesting, you know, and some people can become violent drunks, same thing. If somebody is ingesting a certain substance that's causing them, you know, violence, there ought to be a way then to limit their ability to have that substance because they're a threat to society. And I think that's the one thing we fail to realize.
Well, we're putting the individual user above society.
Well, yeah, in some cases, because it's the old idea, well, you have to have empathy. And I'm going, well, you only have empathy to a certain extent. If, like you said, you offer them help, they refuse it or they go back to their own ways, well, that's their decision. They have to pay the consequences. That old TV show, Beretta, you know, don't do the crime if you can't do the time, that old saying. But we've lost that someplace.
You do realize most people out here don't know
I know,
what
they
you're talking
don't.
about.
I don't.
I do.
Robert Blake, the actor, just died a year or two ago, you know, so that's how old we are.
Yeah. But anyway, with age comes a certain amount of wisdom.
Yeah.
And, you know, all I can say is they're doing things wrong when it comes to the way they're handling drugs, and somebody's got to fix it.
Yeah.
On that note, we started our outreach program so that we could inform the public, everyone out there, of how serious things are and what kind of help is available. And I've said before, if you go on our website, and it'll be on the film there, you can see it, and go to the link page, we got people there from all walks of life handling every counseling problem there is, including homelessness and housing and so forth. And the reason we're doing that is, you know, we think, and we're prejudiced, we're cops, or we were cops, is that the police have gotten a bad rap over the years, ever since incidents occurred that shouldn't have happened, you know. And I used to say back in the day, as I agree, I think this is true now, you know, in the shipyard, if you got one thief, you got one thief.
Yeah.
And the whole shipyard isn't a bunch of thieves. Well, if you got one bad cop, the whole department is not bad, you know. And transparency with police, we don't have a problem with that. I don't think we ever did have a problem with it as long as I was in the department.
I did 3 years in internal affairs with U.S. Customs years ago, and what you just said is true. You need to deal people individually, and I even know of one case where just because a guy was friends with somebody that a U.S. attorney didn't like, this U.S. attorney decided that they were all old dirty. And I remember also I heard one agent say once that, well, I know so-and-so blankety blank is guilty. And I said, well, how do you know that? Well, because so-and-so's a blankety blank. And I'm going, well, just because you don't like the guy or the guy is a pain in the butt doesn't necessarily mean he's guilty. And like I said before, there's honest mistakes and there's dishonest mistakes. You get the guy that he is on the take, he's out there getting money from the bad guys, or maybe he's just a bully and likes to beat people up. Okay. That's a dishonest mistake. An honest mistake is, in the heat of the moment, you make a split-second decision and it's the wrong decision. Either way, you have to step forward and say, hey, maybe I screwed up, maybe I didn't.
Well, either way, you got accountability.
Yeah, exactly. You got to have the accountability. But I think the problem is, like what you're saying, is we've got kind of screwed up on what accountability is anymore.
Well, it's what they did is I think they enhanced accountability and also restricted the flow of policemen.
Yeah.
In order to give a free path to drivers, and that's wrong.
Well, it's like they had that law that, thank God, is gone now, where unless it's a violent felon, you can't chase him. So all these people are stealing cars and waving at the cops as they go by.
Which the pendulum swings both ways. I remember when I started, if it was a violent felon and he's running, shoot him.
Oh yeah.
If he gets away and kills anybody, it's your fault. Well, I don't know anyone that did that, but at the same time, that was how far the pendulum was the other way.
Well, see, I remember it was either 74 or 76, they finally had that Supreme Court decision, and I think it was out of Tennessee, where they put the 2 or 3 step test as to when you could use violence.
Don't shoot.
Yeah, don't shoot against the fleeing felon. Okay. And so, like you said, you've got to be able to articulate that the guy was a threat, that he had done a violent act, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Prior to that, literally, if somebody yelled, stop you blankety blank, and you didn't, there's a good chance that you would get shot. But then they decided that you were giving too much power to the average cop. In other words, he literally was the
executioner.
Yeah. And so they put those limitations.
But, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
You need to have somewhere in the middle so that
exactly.
I still think the majority of public trusts law enforcement.
Yeah.
But I think they also are leery that law enforcement could get carried away, and they're trying to keep it restricted so they don't. Which I don't think that's a bad thing. Except I think you need to give them enough tools to do their job. And one would be, I'm back on the word, accountability.
Oh, yeah.
Need accountability for the criminals.
Well, it's funny how body cams now are actually exonerating a lot of cops. And so there isn't any question.
But the problem is you got to, and they don't. But they need to restrict the news media that if you're going to show a body cam film, you show the whole thing.
No, that's
not just a small excerpt.
That's the thing, though. So then what winds up, in fact, Kitsap County, I know police do this. They're always posting the full story and everything. And that's the thing to do because they know somebody's going to take just part of it. I was watching a thing on YouTube the other day from a different state. And there was this poor female cop. This guy was trying to get her to commit suicide by cop. And he was chasing her around the car with a knife. And she kept saying, put the knife down, put the knife down, put the knife down. He said, shoot me, shoot me, shoot me, shoot me. Well, after going around the patrol car about twice, she finally had to shoot him. So he goes down. He's not dead yet. So I don't know exactly where he shot her because then they cut the video off. But you could see by the body cam, she did everything she could. This guy wanted to die. And years ago when I was in Border Patrol, we were backing up the local police, and we had a guy that tried to do the same thing. He was a drug addict, and he wanted us to kill him.
Yeah, well, there's
Yeah.
a lot of people like that
Yeah,
out there,
you
sadly.
know.
So anyway, we're running out of time here. Just want to say that we're there to give you, the public, information on what's available and what's going on in our local departments. And so we thank you for tuning in. And remember, everyone knows someone that's either on drugs or died from drugs. And being in that situation is heartbreaking, especially if you don't know what to do. Now, we don't have any answers, but we do have people out there that can help guide you in different directions so that you can reach an answer and hopefully help your loved one get better. And you'll learn it's a long haul sometimes. They have to go back to rehab 2-3 times before they do it. But as long as you're making progress, keep encouraging them and keep working on it. Thank you for your time, and we'll be back with other shows down the road. Take care and stay safe out there. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.